Hello and welcome back to Basement Banter on Yup Sports Radio. I'm Jake Urich and I'm here with Evan Anderson coming at you after a week-long hiatus. We're college students. We have to have our spring break. So we took a week off back at home. But now we're back. And now we are here coming to you live just after the Heat erased a 27-point deficit behind LeBron's triple-double to beat the Cavaliers by 3 points in what was another return for LeBron James to Cleveland. So, fittingly, we're going to start off with the Heat win streak, which is now just preposterously long. And so I'm going to throw it to Evan here to talk a little bit about the streak so far.
I feel like we've probably talked about the streak 2 weeks ago when it was on the impressive level. But at this point, it's transcendent impressive, and it's now on like the historical line of things. And it's the second longest streak in history now. And they're gunning for the early 70s Lakers, the Jerry Wests of the world. So,
I mean, I think the thing about this streak that's notable is the fact that people always seem to talk about Jordan and the things that he did and some of his most impressive performances. And now LeBron James is kind of starting to get some of his own that people are going to talk about, bring back moments where he was playing incredibly. And he's probably locked up his fourth MVP in 5 years. So, I mean,
that Celtic game was a defining moment for his career, I think. That just the kind of poetic justice to that game where the big streak that the Rockets had ended against the Celtics, and he's going for his 23rd straight win also against the Celtics, and even with Garnett on the bench, that's a feisty team, and Jeff Green had the game of his life.
Yeah, Jeff Green had the game of his life, and you have to remember that when LeBron started guarding him as an assignment in the fourth quarter with about 9 minutes left, Jeff Green did not score again.
Yeah, so LeBron was doing it on the defensive end, and then he came down and hit his clutch jumper at the end, and that and the celebration will be shown the rest of this season, certainly, perhaps on highlight reels that celebrate his career as a whole. It was that big a moment for him.
And so what do you give the Heat about odds on actually making a run at this streak? I mean, it seems like teams like the Magic and the Cavs come to play against them, and they're giving them some tough games. They're not blowing everyone out right now.
They have to get it together a little bit, certainly. They're starting slow fairly often right now,
which is a problem. But they've been coming back. They came back against the Knicks, Celtics.
They're hardly a flawless team. They are the worst rebounding team in basketball.
Which is all more impressive how Wade and James, what they're doing.
Yeah, they're the best rebounder on the team is LeBron. The second best is probably Dwayne Wade, especially when Bosh has gone away the way that he has on the boards in many of these games. So it's not like they're not vulnerable. I mean, they have a certain definite weakness, but they also have the best player in the game, and
it's not even close anymore. No one is even willing to challenge it. With a Kobe or Durant claim, you can't even make that right now.
So the upcoming schedule, you've got Detroit at home.
Win.
Charlotte at home.
Win.
Like, there's no way they're losing either of those two games. So you get to 25. And then you're looking at Orlando, which is a game that they absolutely should win.
26.
Orlando is one of the worst teams
27.
in basketball now that Redick is in Milwaukee. They go at Chicago again, where they won easily on this streak.
Right, and we saw that live. It was pretty impressive. They didn't even look like they were playing well, and they still were too much for the Bulls to handle.
They go at New Orleans, which again is another of the worst teams in basketball.
They're sitting at 29.
That's 29. And then you get a big one at San Antonio on a Sunday night, which is a potential letdown. I don't think Tony Parker... It would be a stretch, I think, for Tony Parker to be back for that game.
Right.
But if he is, man, what a heavyweight bout there. And you know that the Spurs want to be that team. They want to be the team.
And you know they do, and Pop wants that to happen. And you could be seeing a finals preview.
Yeah, you certainly could.
And speaking of the finals, going off the Heat, while we have kind of concluded that they do have a realistic shot of at least approaching the streak, Boston showed us something the other night. So, do you buy Boston in the East, or are you still going with the Pacers, or do you think there's another team entirely? Does Boston have a shot to make a run again?
Well, are we going to operate under the assumption that Jeff Green turns into some superpower?
No, I mean, no, we're not operating under
Durant
that.
every night?
No, we're crashing to the mean.
They don't.
Do you think they can make the Eastern Conference Finals?
I don't. I think that Garnett is worth a lot in terms of like the Ray Lewis leadership effect, where he's going to make everyone around him better, just almost out of fear that you let him down. And they've got nice pieces, but the backcourt right now, realistically, is the best backcourt is probably Avery Bradley and Jordan Crawford. This is a team that doesn't have a point guard, and that hasn't been a problem yet necessarily. But when it comes playoff time, and you've got a LeBron James or a Dwayne Wade, or even a Paul George applying ball pressure, J.R. Smith, the list goes on and on. You need someone who can adequately handle the ball for 40 minutes. And I don't think they have that on the roster without Rondo. And then up front, they're not a particularly strong team up front. Garnett is in his advanced age more of a jump shooter, and he's not the force on the boards he once was. And Brandon Bass is a softer player too.
So you're still sticking with the Pacers?
I think the Pacers. The Knicks are soft, but I'd still almost take the Knicks over the Celtics.
Okay.
I don't think they're at top.
I think the East is going to be interesting up until the Eastern Conference Finals, just to see who gets there to play.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about the Heat streak, but there's another streak going on it's at the impressive level that we talked about initially, and it's the Denver Nuggets. Now, this has been Evan's team the whole year, the Nuggets, besides his beloved Pistons, which are just, there's not much to love there. He's been pulling for the Nuggets, and he's right. They're sitting at the 3 seed in the West. They're playing great. They're on a streak. I saw them play live in Phoenix the other week, and they're an impressive team that can go on runs, and I like what they've got going. So why don't you go a little bit on about what you like about the Nuggets?
Well, first of all, they don't lose at home, which is
key for the playoffs.
Key for the playoffs, certainly, now that they're creeping into the upper half of the playoff layout for the Western Conference. So they'll be at home at least for the first series. And I think if San Antonio, without Tony Parker, or OKC slips, they're down at Memphis as we speak. They're actually in play for maybe a 2 seed. And a lot of people aren't talking about that, but they're playing at that level right now. I've kind of been level on them the whole year. At the beginning of the year, people were, they didn't recognize necessarily that they were force to be reckoned with in the West. And now people probably think they're a lot better than they are. The reality is they don't have that guy at the end of the game who you absolutely want taking a shot. Although Ty Lawson's getting there, and he's been that guy in the
You're right. No, the Nuggets, watching them live, were visibly better when Ty Lawson was attacking, and especially when he was doing it at the end of the game.
He's the best player in the league at controlling pace, other than maybe LeBron James. I truly believe that. He's so fast. He pushes at opportune times. He knows when to rein it in. He's so great at that. And actually, the key to their turnaround has been his play. Because for the year, he's having a down year versus last year. He was sitting before the streak around 43% for the year, shooting, after last year posting near 49. And for his career, he's 49%, which is phenomenal for a point guard, especially of his size.
Right.
When he was sitting at 43% is when they were hovering in the 6 range in the West. And now, during this streak, he's pulled that up to 46% for the year, which is a substantial gain, and they've gone on this win streak.
You're right.
When he's shooting well, they can play with and beat anybody. And that's road or home.
Well, okay, so going off of that, what do you think the West playoff scenario looks like? So we have, of course, the Spurs, who are currently sitting in the number 1 seed. The Thunder, they looked vulnerable against the Nuggets. And you got the Nuggets, and then you have the Clippers and Denver. Or not Denver, Clippers and Memphis.
Memphis, yeah.
So, there's 5 teams there that are probably the next 5 best teams in the league after the Heat. So they're going to really have a fight out there in the West. Well, who do you see getting to the Western Conference Finals?
Well, can I give you an odd team out of that 5 first?
Yeah.
I would say the Clippers at this stage they're kind of struggling to the finish line. And I don't buy the aerial attack of Blake Griffin and
I don't either.
Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan when it comes to playoff time when you're facing a great defense and defense that's really going to challenge you and going to go up and has athletes with you. And even against a team like the Nuggets with Fareed and JaVale McGee, you're not going to get Brandon Knight facials, and you're not going to get the same kind of athletic advantage that you have against 90% of the league. And you have Chris Paul. You've always got that chance. You've got Jamal Crawford. You've got players that can create for themselves, but they don't have as much of a sustainable offensive model.
They don't.
The other teams that you mentioned.
Okay, so the Clippers are not where I guess they would want to be. But at what point does that become Chris Paul? When they start talking, everyone talked about LeBron stepping up for such a long time. At what point does he have to step up, pull to the next level?
Yeah,
he hasn't really made noise in the playoffs.
You're right, he hasn't, and he's played better of late, but for a stretch there, he had really tailed off after the injury. And coming back and warming up a little bit. He's put up some numbers lately, but again, they've lost 3 of their last 5 games. And they lost their last time out on Tuesday to the Kings by 15 points. And he was 2 for 10, and they're going to go as he goes.
Yep, very true.
That's a burden for a guy who is a great distributor, and that's going to be consistent, but he's never been the type of shooter that you can count on game after game after game after game to hit shots, although in the clutch he's always been pretty great.
We can say the Clippers aren't rolling, but give me the other teams that are going to go to the finals before we move on to a little bit of football talk, and then we're going to get into some March Madness, because it is the season. 'Tis the season, of course.
Well, obviously it depends on how the seeding shakes out, but I think that the 2 best teams in the conference, and I have all year, are Oklahoma City and Denver. And it sounds like I'm discounting the Spurs. I don't mean to, but the Greg Popovich advantage that you have all season long, in that you're going to be more disciplined and more prepared than every other team that you play. And that's not only Popovich, but the superstars there. That's equalized a little bit when you get to the playoffs and you have to play the same team over and over and over.
No, you're exactly right.
Both teams know what the other team has. They've played them 3-4 times by this point.
You're not worried about one night turnarounds.
You're not
preparing,
worried. Yeah. It's just mano a mano, and I think that lineup for Denver is better. And I think of late they've shown better ability to win on the road. And to me, at this point, I'm not sure when they'll meet. Hopefully, it is the conference finals, but I think the Thunder and the Nuggets would be the 2 for me.
Okay, so moving on from there, we're going to go check out a little bit of the NFL news, because it has been a very active free agency session. The big story last week, really, there were multiple headlines, but one of them was Wes Welker and the fact that he jumped ship from New England to Denver. Welker obviously felt that he wasn't adequately compensated by the Patriots, and New England has conflicting message. What do you make of this whole situation, and how do you think it kind of shakes things up?
Well, it's the New England way, first of all. They decided a long time ago that they had 2 indispensable players, or 2 indispensable components of a great team, and that's Tom Brady and a good offensive line. And they've always thrown money at those guys. Well, Brady kind of cut him a break.
Hey, first of all, before you go any further with that, Brady did not really cut them a break. He's actually making.
Well, not yet.
He's making $3 million more out of this deal. So it's not like he took a cut in money. He just shifted it down the line. He's still going to get his money. He's going to actually get $3 million more. They basically said, if you'll put this off, we'll hand you another $3 million.
Yeah.
To me, everyone's making it seem like Tom Brady's a great guy, but honestly, why would he care? He doesn't need the money now. His wife makes the real money. His is just pocket change. And you know what? Like, come on, to make him out to be a good guy for taking a pay cut for this year when he's actually going to get more money in the end. Like, who wouldn't do that?
Yeah, I mean. That all aside, what I was trying to get at was Patriots have decided Tom Brady, offensive line, those are their priorities. They didn't suffer to any great degree when Randy Moss left, as great as he was in that uniform. They didn't suffer a great degree even when the defense kind of fell apart, and it's still kind of not an elite defense.
Well, it isn't.
And they won't fall apart when Wes Welker leaves.
Well, that's it. But I don't. But that's the thing is that are you underestimating Welker? He had 118 catches last year. He's led the league in catches over the last 6 years. He's Tom Brady's go-to guy, and you're also losing Danny Woodhead at the same time. And I'm just not sure that the Patriots really want to turn their offense over to guys like Rob Gronkowski that can't stay healthy, and they get Aaron Hernandez. They're good players, but I mean, Welker is the guy that's the constant. And what you're forgetting is that when the Patriots originally assembled that offensive attack that they had Randy Moss, Dante Stallworth, and Wes Welker. And Welker's been a constant there, just as Brady has. And you know what? Tom Brady wasn't putting up the numbers that he put up until Welker showed up.
That's true. But do we really think... first of all, I guess I'll pose this. Do you really think Danny Amendola is a substantially worse player than Wes Welker?
Here's my problem with... No. He's worse than Wes Welker. I'm not going to say that he's not. But Danny Amendola's been hurt pretty much every year he's been in the league. He's shown a lot of potential, but you never know. He could get hurt right away next year. And while I do think that Danny Amendola is going to have a very successful year, I think that he's probably going to have 80 to 90 catches. I just don't think that he's Wes Welker. And you know what? The Patriots could be right. They could have gotten the guy that will give him production. But what I don't understand is why, if what Wes Welker is saying is true, they would offer to give him Danny Amendola more money than they wanted to give Wes Welker. My question is, why would you not just give Wes Welker his money for another year or two and still get the production out of him that you know you're going to get, and then bring in a guy like Danny Amendola in a couple years? There's always guys like that in the market. It's not like Danny Amendola is like some kind of like player that comes around every once in a while. Like, there are fast guys that come in the league that are quick, that are that size, that can play the slot. Tavon Austin's coming in the league right now.
First, I want to make an argument on the injury front. Both of these guys have suffered in recent years season-ending injuries. It just so happened that Amendola's happened in whatever it was, week 5, versus Welker tearing an ACL at the end of the season.
That's fine, but
one is injury prone and one isn't. Welker has been banged up.
Has Amendola made it through 16 games in a season?
I don't. Well,
I know.
I can tell you the answer to that question, and the answer is one time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not. I mean, that's not a lot of durability there.
No, I mean, but
what I'm saying is when you have a guy like Wes Welker who is as important, or Danny Amendola who's going to come in that offense and be Tom Brady's he's going to be his guy to go to, his safe haven, guy who's always going to catch the ball and always going to be there, and you take him out for a few times a year. I mean, those are games that you may need to win. And with an improved Dolphins team, and the Broncos and the AFC that's just been very strong, even though it's weaker than normal for the past decade. I mean, you can't take these games lightly. The Patriots always get great seeds, and they play so well at Gillette.
Yeah, I'll give you that. It's certainly a substantial loss, but I guess we should turn it over now to the business side and why Welker would have left. Kraft claims that they offered him more money to stay than he's getting to go join up with Peyton Manning, which, whether it's meant to be or not, is a little bit of a slap to the face of Tom Brady, who's thrown him the ball for the past so many years. Unless you don't view it that way.
No, I mean, I'm not really sure who's good to believe here.
Yeah.
The Patriots say the one thing. Bill Belichick does his normal thing where he's just like, I'm not saying anything else because I'm right. And I don't always think that that's the case. Bob Kraft is saying what he's saying, and Wes Welker's saying something different. Regardless, Wes Welker's in Denver right now, and the Patriots don't have him. And the fact is I feel like if they didn't want Welker to walk away, they would have made him a better offer. They wouldn't have been lowballing him. I don't know why everyone's lowballing Wes Welker. I think it's a slight to the position, and I think it's a slight to something that guy can do for your team. I mean, next year, Denver, Eric Decker, and Thomas are just going to benefit so much from having Wes Welker around. Peyton Manning will have him over the middle, and he's had a guy like Brandon Stokely, but I mean, you give him Wes Welker, and that's just a step up. Especially with a Denver attack that is willing to run the ball consistently. When they have a very balanced offense, and when you start throwing Wes Welker the ball in little 5-yard outs, 10-yard crossing patterns, That's as good as run sometimes because you know what? They're getting them the ball 120 times a year. It's like a running back. I mean, he catches it 7 yards down the field. It's a 7 yard gain. Then he starts running after the catch, and his shuttle is just fantastic. It was. I mean, I'm sure he's losing somewhat of a step, but he's really good to go.
I guess the fundamental argument here that's going to be the basis for your opinion is: do you think that Tom Brady
can
exist as the high-level football player that we've known without Wes Welker? Because he was winning championships before Welker, but he never put up the numbers.
Yeah.
You know what?
The thing about Brady is that what he did that was great for his career was that he started off and he was clutch. He was the clutch guy.
Absolutely.
The Patriots defense and Bill Belichick got him the championships, and he stepped up. But in 2007, when he went on his record-setting year, it's no different than LeBron, who's just kind of creating his own moments. That's a moment. That's one of the best quarterback seasons, if not the best. I mean, you could make an argument for Aaron Rodgers of all time. You could probably throw a Peyton Manning season in there as well. But that was just a phenomenal season, and the team that everyone remembers. You don't talk about the 07 Giants when you're talking about the greatest teams of all time and putting them in the conversation with the 85 Bears or a 70s Steelers team or the Dolphins or a 49ers team or a Cowboys team. You talk about the 07 Patriots. That's the team from the 2000s that's good, maybe besides the Baltimore Ravens of 2000. So he set another standard, and that's what he did, but Wes Welker was there. So, I mean, we'll see. Tom Brady's always played at a high level, but we have seen him. There are chinks in his armor in recent years.
Well, yeah, he hasn't been that clutch guy. It's almost like he went from almost like a Flacco-esque figure now, where people view him as, well, he might not be the most productive quarterback. Well,
yeah.
Flacco is less than that, but he might not be the most productive quarterback, but he's going to step up in the clutch. And these days, he is one of the most productive quarterbacks, but you don't know what you're getting in the clutch these days.
Yeah, but you know what? The problem is that his defense has just not been very good. And until they really change that, which I think they're making an effort to do with some of the signings that they've made, their defensive backfield's largely been the issue. And I think they're trying to rectify that. But, I mean, I think that Tom Brady would be a little bit more clutch, too, if his defense was playing better. Because it just helps the offense out. And he has to do it all the time. And if his defense was better, then he would have to do it one time, like he did back in 2002, 3, and 5 when they won the Super Bowls of those years. So, We'll see. And moving on from that, do you think that free agency has been more exciting this year? I think there's been more buzz, more big names moving around. I mean, there have been some big moves. Big guys getting cut, big moves, trades. I mean, it's been action-packed. I mean, come on. You can't say that it's not a big deal when Anquan Bolden, the Ravens guy that was just, without a doubt, probably the most important offensive player for them.
That intrigued me.
First important offensive player, you send him to the team that you just beat in the Super Bowl. That's nuts. And then
for next to nothing.
The NFC West, which has just been laughable for the teams that they put in the playoffs in the last part of the 2000s decade, when they put in like a 7-9 Seattle team that should have lost to the Saints team that was better than them until Marshawn Lynch just went off. Yeah. I mean, they're putting in teams below 500 in the playoffs, just a laughing stock of the league, and all of a sudden the 49ers and the Seahawks are probably the two best teams right now. I mean, that's incredible. Seattle's making the trade for Percy Harvin, which also makes Minnesota better because they get a bunch of picks, a first round this year, a third round next year, and they signed Greg Jennings. I mean, there's a lot of movement happening, and I think that a lot of teams right now are sitting in positions, maybe save for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens, when they think that they're going to be better next year.
Well, to me, first picks are overvalued.
I tend to say the same thing, but if you have a next guy up type of mentality, like the team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, New England Patriots, or Baltimore Ravens do, then your picks are not overvalued.
Question is, do you have enough faith in the Minnesota front office that they're going to get a game-changing player at 28 or later in the first round, and then they're
not getting. They have like 23 and 25. Don't quote me on that. But here's the thing: this draft,
they're not going to get anybody of Percy Harvin's caliber, or it would seem highly.
They signed Greg Jennings. They would have had to pay Harvin regardless.
That's true.
But what I'm saying is that this draft is not very good at the top. For your top 15 players, you're not getting some guys that you normally do. But from the middle of the first round down to the third round, there is remarkable depth. And while a lot of teams need a cornerback, you can get that cornerback in the second round because there's just going to be guys there that are overvalued for second-round talents.
Yeah.
It's an interesting year for the draft. I personally tend to think that Seattle is a little overrated. A lot of power rankings have them at number 1. They did have a great year last year, but teams normally go as the quarterbacks go. And while I'm a believer in Russell Wilson, I think that there's a sophomore slump there's something to be said for that. Teams do not get to the Super Bowl with rookie quarterbacks normally, and the 2 second-year quarterbacks that have really made a run at it are Ben Roethlisberger and Dan Marino. Dan Marino could never get back, and he never won his, and Ben Roethlisberger won his Super Bowl in his second year. Besides that, there are not a lot of guys that were really making serious runs as sophomore quarterbacks. And while they did get a lot better with Cliff Averill, it's still, when it comes down to a playoff game in January, it's on your quarterback, not on your pass rusher. And that's where I think that it's tough to kind of put them. But Kaepernick's in the same spot as in San Francisco, and one of those teams is probably likely to come out of the NFC.
You know my money's on Russell Wilson.
Hey, I know your money's on Russell Wilson. My money's on Russell Wilson, but the league changes from year to year, and I'm not quite so sure that that a guy like Aaron Rodgers couldn't just take a playoff game away from the Seattle Seahawks because he's just that good.
No, absolutely. Aaron Rodgers can take a game from anybody at any time if he gets the ample protection, ample support from his dwindling supporting cast.
Yeah, I mean, the dwindling supporting cast. The Ravens lost, I believe, 6 defensive starters.
Yeah.
That's insane. Ed Reed's probably going to the Texans, which is a move we didn't even talk about, but it's just making waves. It's just we've hit a point where teams that were really dominant at the end of the last decade, the Steelers, the Ravens, the Packers, are kind of losing some of their guys. And we're seeing a new league come out as a result. So I think we've kind of hit up on the NFL free agency here. There's some exciting things to come. In 6 days, Manti Te'o will be running his 40 time here at Notre Dame, and so we'll be able to give you some insight on that next week, I suppose.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to move on to a more pertinent topic, March Madness.
March Madness.
As we speak right now, the LaSalle Boise State playing games on in the background, and it's just time. It's time for March Madness, and while the NBA and the NFL are always fantastic, there's nothing like the opening round of the NBA or the NCAA tournament. I don't think there's anything better than the opening weekend where everybody has hope, and there are so many games on that you could just watch all day and just completely enjoy it. So right now we're going to do some rapid fire of our picks here. We're going to run through each region, and we're going to highlight some of the teams that we're picking, and then at the end we're going to give you our final 4.
Absolutely.
So let's start in the Midwest region. It's the region with Louisville, St. Louis as the 4 seed, Michigan State, and Duke. Tell me a little bit about what you think about this region.
I think Louisville comes out, pending kind of how they officiate that press, which is borderline illegal, in my opinion, with the hands. A little handsiness going on. But,
of course.
There's been a lot of talk about St. Louis. There's been a lot of talk about Oregon coming off their Pac-12 tourney run as potentially a dangerous 12 seed. A lot of people like St. Mary's. Michigan State and Tom Izzo are always dangerers.
And you got the Dukies.
Duke with Ryan Kelly is maybe, a lot of people believe, the best team in basketball. So this, and we didn't even mention Doug McDermott, but Creighton's in there also. So
it's a good region.
The power region.
It's the power region, and Louisville as the number 1 seed normally doesn't end up with the power region. So give me an upset in this region, and give me the Elite 8.
An upset. My upset in this region, and actually my only upset by seed, is New Mexico State over St. Louis. And that is not supported by any advanced metric of any kind, except that I think that a team that plods the way that St. Louis does will have trouble with a 7'5", 355-pound center. And that is Sim Body out of New Mexico State. And
it's huge.
He is massive. And he's not an unskilled player. He didn't start to start the year, which brought his averages down. But he gave them about 10-7. If you take his early season 8-minute kind of cameos out, then it looks more like 13-9.
Which is, to be honest, just to say this in general, it's something that needs to be changed. Kobe Bryant comes in the other night, plays like for the half of the first quarter, and all of a sudden his average is going to drop because he didn't score any points.
Yeah.
It needs to be. It's points per game is a little deceiving when you play 8 minutes, like you're just saying. So
exactly. So he, especially in their conference tourney, where he finished with a couple 15-15 games and was dominant, has the potential to be a game-changing player, especially when you're not forcing him to run up and down the floor, where he can be a bit of a liability. He was the WAC Freshman of the Year. You'll hear his name again. Actually, you'll hear his brother's name again, too. He has a 7'3", 330-pound brother who's being recruited in New Mexico State right now.
Oh, wow.
So if you can imagine, they're
double trouble.
Yeah, it'll be a force to be reckoned with. But that's my upset pick in the bracket. And my Elite Eight, my 2 picks out of there are Louisville and Michigan State. I've got Michigan State actually beating not Duke but Creighton. And I picked Creighton over Duke for 2 reasons. One is Duke has been liable to give up big games to individual players this season, not only this season, but in tourneys past. Last year they ran into probably the best player from a mid-major conference in C.J. McCollum in the first round from Lehigh, and he took it to him to the tune of 30 points.
Lehigh. Let's just stop and appreciate the mispronunciation there.
He took it to him with 30 points, and we all know how that ended. So I think that McDermott certainly has the potential to do the same thing. He's actually a much more efficient scorer this year than McCollum was last year. But beyond that, I know I'm going to root for my bracket, and I refuse to root against the Great White Hope in favor of the Dukies, who I just can't stand on any level. So that's what I've got going on there.
Well, since you pretty much covered every team in the region after I asked for the Elite Eight and the upset pick,
give me yours. Give me yours.
No, I'll keep mine short. My upset pick is Oregon. I have them going to the Sweet 16. I think they're going to be playing well coming off the Pac-10 or Pac-12 tournament. I don't particularly like Oklahoma State, and I called for St. Louis to be upset by New Mexico State in the first round, so I got a 12 or 13 seed going to the Sweet 16, and it just happens to be Oregon. In terms of my Elite Eight, I think it's going to be Louisville and Duke. I'm a believer in picking a bracket that's just generally conservative, because if you don't, then it's just going to be bad. It's going to be bad if you just start trying to pick upsets. So I like Duke with Ryan Kelly, and I think that when you have a coach like Coach K, it's not unforeseeable that you get to the Elite Eight or the Final Four at any given year.
The question for Duke Michigan State, if it ends up there, as a lot of us think it will, is going to be, can Adrian Payne and Derek Nix handle Mason Plumlee? Because he's really the engine that makes them go. And the first team that shuts him down will be the last game that Duke plays in this tournament.
Fair enough. So, moving on. Now we're going to hit the West region here. And this seems to be, in contrast to the Midwest, the weakest region overall.
Yeah,
everyone seems to have a consensus that here is the region where some team could make a run that is not a top 4 seed.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what do you got here? I think a lot of people have Ohio State coming out. I do.
I do as well.
And I have Gonzaga losing early. I have them losing to Pitt.
We both do.
We both do. But here's the thing: is that Pitt is vastly underseeded based on the kind of the metrics that are now becoming popular. They're a deep team that foul trouble is not going to affect them in the tournament like it normally does to Big East teams. And while they don't have a consistent scorer, they have a guy like Trey Woodall that does run the offense and run the team. So I think that Pitt's going to beat Wichita State and beat Gonzaga. You know what? I was a Panther fan growing up, and I just don't have enough faith in them to go any further than that after the big win. So I actually have Kansas State in the Elite Eight, which is something I'm just not happy about, but it's what I was kind of feeling when I filled out my bracket, so it's what I'm going with. And Ohio State's coming out the other side with my upset pick being Belmont. Belmont's been here before, and you know what? I'm just really not high on the Arizona team. I watched them play a few times, and I'm just not impressed. I think they've been overrated all season, and I think that when you come into the tournament as a 6 seed, when you've been overrated from the Pac-12, and you play against a good mid-major, that's just a recipe for a loss.
I actually don't have a single upset by seed in the first round of this tournament. I like Arizona in terms of their potential, and I like that they get kind of a fresh start, because at the start of the season they were maybe the most dynamic team in basketball, and they beat good teams like Miami, like Marquette, I believe, on the road, and they did some really impressive things. That fresh start combined with the game in Salt Lake, I think, is probably enough to push them through the next round. The other notable thing I would say, beyond that Wisconsin is dangerous as always, is that the single most important player in this bracket to me will be Steven Adams, the Pitt center, because if he can handle Kelly Olynyk in that second round game, assuming that they get by Wichita, which would be just disastrous for my bracket if they did not.
1:40 start tomorrow. I'll be watching.
But assuming that they can get by Wichita State, it's going to really come down to, can Steven Adams handle Olynyk? They're both 7 feet tall. Olynyk is certainly the more proven player, but Adams has the potential to change his shots and bother him in ways that nobody in the West Coast Conference did all year.
And for people that don't know about Adams, he's an Australian-born player that's come to the U.S. He's gotten significantly better as the years progress. He's more comfortable in Jamie Dixon's defense and offensive scheme. He was, in the beginning of the year, he had trouble with the pace of the U.S. game, which is a lot quicker than it is in Australia, apparently. And, he's really come on. He would probably be a top 20 pick if he left this year, but he's probably going to be back. So that's only good for the Panthers team in the future. But I agree. I think that Steven Adams will be able to kind of combat what Gonzaga has to offer. And you know what? Down the road, you could see some more out of him. So who do you have coming out of this region, Evan?
I have Ohio State also, and my Elite Eight tentatively is Pittsburgh and Ohio State. I'm thinking of changing that to Wisconsin because I think it's a more safe pick.
Quick note on Wisconsin: they are a bad free throw shooting team.
They are
which
bad.
Is just not good for the tournament. If anyone still has yet to pick their brackets, just keep that in mind if you think they're going to be in a close game. So moving on from there to the South. This region is an interesting region. A lot of people seem to have seeds that are not number 1 or number 2 coming out. I'm not one of them. I decided to go with Kansas. I think I like this Kansas team. I think they have a lot to offer from a lot of different players. And you know what? Bill Self seems to either coach the team to the Final Four or lose in the first or second round. So I anticipate Kansas going far this time out. And I just don't think that Michigan is going to be able to stop them in the Sweet 16, and I don't think Florida's going to be able to stop them in the Elite 8. My upset pick in this bracket is a common one, and it's just Minnesota. I'm sure
Hardly feels like an upset.
Yeah, exactly. Just the way the people are picking it. So you know what? Maybe UCLA will come out and play, and we'll see what Shabazz Muhammad has to offer. But that's my upset pick, and right now I'm sticking with Kansas in the Final Four.
I have Florida coming out. Again,
also a popular pick.
To me, the Kansas-Florida game has a lot of bearing on the rest of the tournament. And again, I'm going to give you another sort of obscure, most important player for the region, and that's Patrick Young. And what can he do against Jeff Withey? He came in with all those expectations, and he's a massive guy. Thick, 6'10", 7'1", 7'2" wingspan. But he's not always productive. And can he do enough against Jeff Withey for Florida to beat them? I have Florida coming out. They're kind of somewhat of an unpredictable team. They were 26-1 in games decided by double digits, and they were 0-6 in games decided by single digits, which, as I'm sure you've figured out, means that they did not win a single game by single digits all year.
Which is nuts.
Which is insane. They
win close games. I'm not sure I feel about that.
Yeah. So they were a team I thought long and hard about. But what it comes down to for me is that they are one of the most experienced teams in this tournament. That starting lineup is riddled with senior, junior experience, and that wins games in tournament time. You've got Billy Donovan at the
Good
helm.
coach.
He's won a couple championships, and he had them as a 7 seed, a game away from the Final Four last year, 3 points away against Louisville.
Right.
So it's certainly there's a track record there, and for me, this time of year, there are coaches that I just trust, and Tom Izzo's one, and Billy Donovan's one, and I'm banking on his ability to kind of shore up those things, because in terms of advanced metrics, Florida ranks as the top team in basketball. They're the only team in the top 5 in both offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency. And a lot of that maybe is skewed by them just beating the crap out of SEC teams. But they also did it in the preseason. I mean, they had a fantastic. They were actually prone to lapses more in the SEC season than they were.
I mean, it's hard to not get a little bored with the schedule that you play in the SEC.
Here's what I'm betting with Florida. It's almost like the effect with the Heat at the start of the year, where what do they have to play for? Because they don't have any near competition in the SEC. No one's anywhere near as good as them in the SEC.
Right.
What? Nobody's anywhere near as good as them in the SEC. You went in the non-conference.
Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we're going to move forward to the East bracket. This bracket of mine is just nuts. I have Syracuse coming out. Just a low seed. I had 1s and 2s everywhere else, and I just think in a year like this, a low seed is going to come somewhere, and I pick Syracuse. I really like Miami. They're going to the Elite Eight, but I just don't trust them to go to the Final Four, and I think Indiana's just prone to a loss, and I think that's going to happen in Sweet 16 against Syracuse. In terms of upset picks, I don't really have one, besides the fact that I'm picking Colorado over Illinois, because I just don't think Illinois has done that much.
I'm the opposite here. I have a bunch of upset picks in this bracket. I actually have Bucknell over Butler, which I know is...
Oh, I do as well. Sorry.
In direct kind of contrast to what I was just saying about there are certain coaches you trust. This isn't a Butler team that I necessarily trust. They're not particularly efficient. I think they were exposed by VCU defense a few weeks ago that kind of pressured them into turnovers repeatedly. And I'm not sure they really have a point guard, so that's why I went with with Bucknell there. But my big upset, my biggest for the bracket overall, is Davidson over Marquette. That's the 14 over the 3.
So you get an 11-14 matchup.
I have an 11-14 matchup in the second round, and I'll tell you why. Davidson has the longest win streak in NCAA Division I right now at 17 games. They dominated their conference, and they were tested early in the year. And they lost to teams like Gonzaga, and they lost to teams like New Mexico, but they actually had double-digit leads in both those games. They lost to Duke by 17, but they were competitive most of the second half before Duke ran away from them at the end. And I think even just having seen those teams, and they beat a Vanderbilt, and they beat a West Virginia on neutral floors, even having just had those experiences makes them a very dangerous tournament team. And their best player for once is an interior player. They've got Jake Cohen, who's a top offensive player in the country. He can shoot the 3, he can get inside, he has pretty good post moves. You got him going against a Marquette team that I'm not sure has enough size to combat that necessarily. So that's my big wild upset pick. But I do have Indiana, Miami, and Florida come through to the Elite Eight. You talked about Syracuse. I see a 2-3 zone as cowardly, personally, almost. It's a nice defense, but it's almost like it's a little bit of fool's gold. When you get it's a gimmick. It's when you get a team that shoots the ball as well as Indiana from as many players, I don't see that upset happening. Although I agree they're a little bit ripe for the picking, but with Watford and Holes and Oladipo and Sheehy shooting the way they do, I don't see them losing to that zone. And then I've actually got Indiana coming out over Miami and Florida because I don't see a match for Cody Zeller there. And I think sort of like the Duke and Plumlee situation. The first game that they play, where there's a match for Zeller, is the last game that Indiana will play in this tournament.
Fair enough. So let's move it on. To wrap this up, we're going to give you our Final Four and the picks from there. My Final Four is Louisville, Ohio State, and Kansas and Syracuse. Kansas is going to beat Cuse. Louisville is going to beat Ohio State, and I think Kansas is going to beat Louisville in the NCAA Finals to crown Kansas champion.
I have Louisville over Ohio State. Aaron Kraft is fantastic, but you can speed him up. And I think certainly Louisville, if anybody has the ability to do that, I think they have a match between Bohannon and Hancock for Deshaun Thomas, and I see them coming on top of that game. On the other side, I very badly wanted to take Florida to my final, but I have Indiana beating them there because I couldn't fathom Patrick Young putting together back-to-back performances against Jeff Withey and Cody Zeller. That would be enough to push them into that final game. I'm not even sure he can handle Withey, so I didn't want to take him beyond that. And I don't. I've said before, I'm not a Zeller fan, so it pained me to have them there, but it is what it is. And then in my final, I have Louisville over Indiana. Gorgie Jang isn't the ideal Zeller matchup. He doesn't have a lot of body to him, but he is a big, long guy, and he can bother shots. And beyond that, I think a Holes and even an Oladipo, Russ Smith and Peyton Siva can force into turnovers. And their ability to do that will determine the outcome of that game, should it ever come to fruition. So I've got Louisville as my 2013 NCAA champions.
All right.
As I hate it.
So I've got Kansas, Buck's got Louisville, and that's all that we've got for you here at Basement Banter on Yup Sports Radio. We'll check in with you next week after the first round of the tournament's done. Just ready for a lot more action. That's all for us here at Yup.